Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. So, the first thing that I wanted to share with you this week, I heard this hilarious story over the course of the week. There's this other YouTube channel that I've recently found. It's called Cuxa. I struggled to figure out how to pronounce it properly at first. It's spelt like this. It's basically, there's this Irish fella who uploads these weird but interesting videos about strange stories. And the way he tells these stories is very, very good. Also, probably the reason that drew me to the channel in the first place, because it is an actual person doing actual research and actually sitting in front of a microphone and reading an actual script that a real person has generated, rather than the constant deluge of AI research, scripted and narrated crap that YouTube is drowning under at the moment. But the one story in particular that I wanted to share with you this week is to do with Irish traffic violations. So it turned out that one day the Irish police, and they weren't even specifically looking for anything, but somebody just noticed a sort of anomaly on one of their databases of recorded traffic offences. There was one offender in particular whose name just kept coming up over and over and over. And when they checked the figures, it turned out that this one person had committed more than 50 driving and traffic violations of one kind or another. We're talking offences ranging from speeding to parking violations to actually being involved in traffic accidents. I mean, you name it. If there was a traffic violation, this person had been prosecuted for it. More than 50 individual violations, and yet for some strange reason they'd never had their license revoked. The offender's name, and I need to take extra care to try to get this pronunciation correct, because it's going to be very important, because it's a Polish name, was Prawo Jazdy. And when they started digging deeper, it turned out that in every single case, Prawo had given away a different address. So there's clearly something going on here, and possibly this is why they'd never had their license revoked, because they kept supplying false addresses. And when the police investigated, they couldn't find any evidence of anybody with the name Prawo Jazdy living at any of the addresses that had been supplied for any of the convictions for traffic violations. Now this had them stumped, because clearly whoever this person was, they were an absolute menace and should not be allowed behind the wheel of a car. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute here. Ireland's not exactly known for its huge Polish population, is it? Maybe that's what's suspicious here. Well, actually, it kind of is. A lot of Polish people go to Ireland to work. They're still inside the European Union, unlike certain other island nations off the coast of Europe that thought it was a good idea to vote to impose economic sanctions upon themselves. But Poland does actually have a large number of economic migrants working and living in Ireland. In fact, they're the single biggest racial group of economic migrants working and living in Ireland. So it's not out of the question that at some point you're going to get Poles committing traffic violations. But one single Polish driver, more than 50 violations, supplying a false address every single time they got arrested. There's something very suspicious going on there. And there was, but probably not in the way you're thinking. Unless you are, of course, Polish or speak Polish. If that's the case, you've probably been laughing your ass off for the last 3 minutes. You see, Prawo Jazdy hadn't actually been supplying a false address every time they were arrested for committing a traffic violation, because Prawo Jazdy isn't actually a person. Prawo Jazdy is Polish for driver's license. So no, every time the police checked the addresses given, they couldn't find anybody living there with the name Prawo Jazdy. Because it's not a name. It's Polish for driver's license. Here's a Polish driver's license. His name is not Prawo Jazdy, it's Jan Kowalski. But Prawo Jazdy is written in big bold text at the top of the driver's license, so that's what the police took down every time they pulled somebody over and said, "Driver's license, please." You see, the problem was that at the time, there was no standardised EU driving licence. I mean, they all looked vaguely similar. For example, here's a Norwegian driving licence. There are similarities, but they're clearly different. Now, since this whole came to light, EU driving licenses have been standardised, so regardless of whether you speak the language written on the licence or not, the Irish police and the police all over Europe now know exactly what part of the driving licence is the name and what part just says driving licence in the language of whoever's licence it is. However, at the time, it was so funny that the Irish police were actually awarded the 2009 Ig Nobel Prize for Literature as a result of their cock-up. Unsurprisingly, they didn't attend the awards ceremony, although the prize was accepted on their behalf by a Polish national who had received a driving conviction in Ireland. This whole thing reminded me of another story. The Phantom of Heilbronn, also known as the Woman Without a Face. The story of the Woman Without a Face begins in 1993 at a murder scene in Germany, where a 62-year-old woman had been found murdered in her home. And forensic analysis found some DNA on a teacup in the kitchen where the body was found. Now, they couldn't get an awful lot out of it, other than it was a woman, probably of Eastern European descent. But other than that, they had nothing. They had no match. This DNA wasn't on any database that the German authorities had access to. So the crime went unsolved, but the DNA remained on file. 8 years later, in March 2001, there's a very similar murder in Freiburg, also in Germany. This time it's a 61-year-old man who was found dead, a victim of murder, and forensic analysis turned up another DNA sample, this time on the handle of a kitchen drawer, and it's the same woman. Same crime, same circumstances, same DNA. Now it's starting to look like we've got a serial killer on our hands. But again, the police have very, very little to go on. The only thing that they can prove is that the same woman, again, probably of Eastern European descent, was present at the scene of both murders. Other than that, they've still got nothing to go on. One of the strange things about this case was that it's actually kind of unusual for a woman to be that kind of serial killer. I mean, it's not completely unheard of for women to be serial killers, but they're usually not violent serial killers. I mean, one of the victims was strangled. And if a woman's going to kill somebody, usually they use poison. It's very, very rare for a woman to kill somebody with their own hands. So this is already a very unusual case. And it's about to get a whole lot more unusual. Now, so far there'd been an 8-year gap between these two murders, but it would not take long at all before the Woman Without a Face started showing up at other crime scenes. In October of the same year, her DNA was detected on a syringe containing heroin at another crime scene. Later that same month, her DNA is found on a half-eaten cookie in a trailer that had been broken into in the woods near Gerolstein, also in Germany. But then she started expanding her activities further afield. Her DNA was found on a toy pistol that had been used to rob a bunch of Vietnamese gem traders in France. A year later, she's back in Germany, with her DNA being found on a rock that had been used to break a window in order to conduct a burglary in Saarbrücken. The next year, she's in Austria, breaking into optician stores. Consultation with the Austrian police reveals that she's actually had a bit of a crime spree in Austria over the preceding 4 years, with over 20 thefts and burglaries of cars and motorbikes in the 4 years between 2003 and 2007. But it's in 2008 where she really shifts into overdrive. Beginning in January, her DNA is found in a car used to transport the bodies of 3 Georgians who'd been murdered, again in Germany. There's the burglary of a disused public swimming pool, 4 cases of a home invasion, an apartment break-in, all leading up to April 2008, the robbery of a woman on the 9th of May 2008 in a clubhouse, and her DNA was then found in a car after the killing of a 45-year-old auxiliary nurse who was found dead at the end of October 2008. All of these crimes occurring in Germany. Police are absolutely mystified. What began to look like a case of a serial killer has turned into a crime spree of epic proportions. They have absolutely no idea who this person is or why she's doing what she's doing. Certain theories are floated. Perhaps she's just a sort of contract criminal for hire, which would kind of explain why there's such a broad range of crimes that this person's been committing. I mean, you've got everything ranging from murder to burglary to drug possession to car theft. There's really no connection between any of these crimes, with the possible exception of the first two murders, which occurred in similar circumstances even if they were 8 years apart. But the theory falls apart when you realise that nobody's going to hire anybody to commit some of these crimes. I mean, who hires somebody to break into a trailer in the woods in Germany and eat half a biscuit? Although it was possible that the trailer in question had been used by criminals to stash drugs or money, and the woman without a face had just decided to help herself to a cookie while she was there, and let's face it, if you're stashing drugs and money in a trailer in the woods in Germany, you're probably not going to declare to the police exactly what it was that was stolen. So the theory isn't entirely without merit. Well, the big break in the case came courtesy of the French police a year later, in 2009, when a very badly burnt body of a man was found who was determined to have been an asylum seeker who went missing under mysterious circumstances 7 years earlier. They were able to track down his application for asylum, and on the application, he'd had to give his fingerprint. They were able to retrieve a DNA sample from the fingerprint. It was the woman without a face. The French police were highly sceptical that the woman without a face was actually a male asylum seeker who had died 7 years previously, given the crime spree that she'd been on in the meantime. This is where they began to suspect perhaps somebody had been tampering with the evidence. But how could she possibly have been interfering with the forensic results of the multitudes of crime labs all across Europe who'd been conducting the forensic examination of the DNA samples found at all of these crime scenes? That's just not possible. I mean, the samples must have been contaminated before they got to the labs. In fact, since the police at each scene were just opening fresh boxes of cotton buds and using them to get the samples, they would have had to have been contaminated before... Oh. They eventually found out who the woman without a face was. She was a middle-aged woman of Eastern European descent who worked at the factory that made the cotton buds. You see, at the time, there were no specific regulations that governed the sale and use of equipment that was going to be used for the collection of forensic samples and its subsequent analysis. In some cases, when they ran out, the police were literally just going to the supermarket to buy bags of cotton buds. And the woman in question was apparently allergic to the latex gloves that were issued for use at the factory where these cotton buds were made. Apparently it irritated her skin. So thousands of these things had been contaminated with her sweat and skin oil samples, which is why her DNA was found at all kinds of crime scenes all across Europe. They've tightened up the regulations since, of course. But you have to wonder just exactly how many more crimes had been contaminated in a similar manner, where DNA evidence had been used to secure convictions. It doesn't really bear thinking about. So anyway, moving on swiftly. Alien Romulus, it's out. In fact, it came as a bit of a surprise. I knew the movie was coming out soon-ish, but it was actually on, I think, Wednesday last week, when I thought, when's this movie coming out? And checked and realised, oh, it's coming out on Friday. So on Friday, I went to see Alien Romulus. And it's actually rather good. Now, I don't want to get into any spoilers here. The movie's just come out, and I'm certainly not going to spoil it for anybody. But I did really, really enjoy it. It wasn't perfect, but at least it wasn't as mind-bogglingly stupid as Alien Prometheus, for example, and to a lesser degree, Alien Covenant. And unlike both of those Ridley Scott movies, they at least remembered to put the alien in it. Yeah, okay, yeah, I know. The alien was actually in Covenant, barely. They sort of tacked it on as a bit of an afterthought at the end. But, and again, without wanting to get into spoilers here, I came out of the movie thinking Romulus was to Alien what Rogue One was to Star Wars. And I realise there are people out there who didn't think much of Star Wars Rogue One. But if you're a Star Wars fan and you appreciated Rogue One, you'll probably enjoy Romulus in the same way. Because it's kind of the best way to describe it, I think, is a love letter to the original Alien, with elements from Aliens as well, and some elements from Alien Resurrection. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it's an enjoyable movie. There's a lot of callbacks to Alien in particular, and Aliens to a lesser degree. This might be a little bit too much fan service for certain viewers. I mean, I was okay with it, even though some of the callbacks were a bit heavy-handed at times. But, I mean, again, you know, the movie's been criticised as being nothing more than an Alien fan film. And I can see where that criticism comes from, but, well, Rogue One was criticised for not being anything more than a Star Wars fan film, and I really enjoyed Rogue One. So again, you know, if you're that type of fan, you're really going to enjoy Alien Romulus. Like I said, though, not perfect. And this I can at least talk about, and it's not really a spoiler. They do take a couple of liberties with the Alien life cycle. Although they do show new parts of the Alien life cycle, which we've never seen before, and which is actually really, really cool. But I'm talking about the whole process where you go from facehugger to implanted egg to chest burster to fully grown alien. In Romulus, that takes about 20 minutes, which is a little silly. But again, you know, it's fine. It's fine. I didn't really mind that. They had to kind of rush things along a bit in order to get a fully grown alien stalking the cast before, well, I can't really say because spoilers, but things needed to happen quickly. So, but like I said, it's fine. I really enjoyed it. It's not great, but it is very good, and I can thoroughly recommend it. And I can't wait to watch it again with Rita when it comes out on stream, because she is going to shit herself watching this movie. I couldn't believe the film certificate that it got here in Britain. It's a 15 rating. I think that translates to an R rating in the USA, although it's not strictly the same. I think an R rating in America means that nobody under the age of 17 can see it without a parental guardian. But it's kind of surprising that this movie passes for a 15 or an R rating today, because it's absolutely more gory than Alien, which came out in 1979 and was X-rated, and Aliens, which came out in 1986 and was X-rated, and yet anyone as young as 15, at least here in the UK, or 17 in the USA, can get in to see this movie without an accompanying adult. My, how times change. But anyway, yeah, Alien Romulus, definitely worth it. Was cautiously optimistic about it being any good, and was pleasantly surprised to find that it was. And on a similar subject, 2 weeks to go before the release of Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws. Again, something that I am cautiously optimistic about, but I'm ready for it to be utter crap, because it's Ubisoft. The system requirements for the game have just been announced though, and they're actually not that bad. I'm talking about the PC-specific system requirements here, of course, which are the only ones I care about. If your PC's got the specifications to handle it, though, you can look forward to all kinds of stuff that our console brethren can only dream about, like support for ultra-wide monitors, uncapped frame rates, and all the good ray tracing stuff. But even if you don't have a beefy PC, you can get by with something entirely affordable. To get the game just running, which will be at 30 frames per second and 1080p, and I mean, let's face it, unless you're playing something like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, 30 frames per second is absolutely fine, unless you're playing a Twitch shooter, and this is not a Twitch shooter. And 1080p is still the resolution that the overwhelming majority of PC users play their games at. In fact, even something as visually demanding as Cyberpunk 2077 plays just fine and looks fantastic with upscaling at that kind of frame rate and that kind of resolution. And in order to get these kind of results from Star Wars Outlaws, all you need is a GTX 1660, that's a nearly 4 generation old graphics card, and 16 megabytes of RAM. So that's encouraging. Basically, a potato PC will be able to run it, and it will look okay. When you move up to the recommended settings, however, there's a fairly large increase in system requirements. You go from a GTX 1660 to an RTX 3060. Your processor needs to be something like a Ryzen 5 5600. You still only need 16 gigabytes of RAM, but you still also need 65 gigabytes of solid-state disk storage. And this is to get it running still only at 1080p, but this time with 60 frames per second, and again, with your upscaler set to quality. There's a couple of other settings, Enthusiast, which I'm not going to get into, but that's for running it at 2K. If you want to run this game at 4K, however, on the Ultra preset, with the upscaler set to quality, you're going to need an RTX 4080 with 16GB of onboard RAM. You're going to need a Ryzen 7 5800, still just the 16GB of system RAM, and the 65GB of SSD storage. So if you want to get this thing looking at its best, you are going to need, which I suppose is not surprising, a fairly chunky PC. What's interesting to note though is even on minimum settings, you're going to need some kind of upscaler. Whether that's DLSS or whatever the AMD equivalent is. If you've got the PC to handle it though, you're going to be able to have access to things like ray-traced global illumination, reflections and shadows, RTX dynamic illumination support, DLSS 3.5 support, including ray reconstruction, frame generation, super resolution, and a whole bunch of other industry buzzwords that I don't fully understand, but which mean the game's going to look really, really good. Now, if they can just remember to put a competent story in it, and characters that I don't hate, it's all going to be good. 2 weeks to go. Guess we're going to find out. Oh, I'll tell you what else I have been playing, now that I've finished Horizon Forbidden West, and I'm sitting around waiting for Star Wars Outlaws to come out. Please, Star Wars Outlaws, just, it doesn't have to be great, it just doesn't have to be shit. That's all I'm asking. I mean, that's really all I'm hoping for from a Ubisoft title these days. It doesn't have to be great, just please don't be shit. Anyway, there's new DLC out for Dredge. It's not the first time Dredge has had some DLC. There was one called The Pale Reach that came out last year, which was alright. I did play through it and I did complete it. It only took about 2 hours, and it wasn't really the sort of thing I could really get away with putting into a video. But this new DLC, the Iron Rig, is very, very good. Again, it's not huge, although it approaches how to do DLC in, I think, a better way than the Pale Reach did. See, the Pale Reach was its own self-contained area down to the south, an area full of ice. And the story wasn't bad, but this new DLC, the Iron Rig, it adds new stuff to all of the existing areas within Dredge. And it doesn't take a huge length of time to get through it. I completed the whole thing in about a day. It probably took me about 4 times as long as it did to get through the Pale Reach. But it was enjoyable, and I did record it all. So on the off chance that we run into a bit of a gap between Horizon Forbidden West finishing and Star Wars Outlaws starting, you can be looking forward to some Dredge content in the near future. Still got time to talk about the latest Humble Bundle, and oh boy, you are getting a bargain this time around. I mean, you always do with a Humble Bundle, but the price you're paying for the amount of hours of gameplay you're getting this time around is completely off the charts. If you pick up their currently ongoing RPG Masters bundle, for $35 you get Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous plus its Season Passes, Pathfinder Kingmaker Enhanced Plus and its Season Pass, Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition, the Complete Adventures, and here's where I start to get really excited, Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, Baldur's Gate 1 Enhanced Edition, Planescape Torment Enhanced Edition, and you've got 3 of the greatest role-playing games ever written for PC right there, and Icewind Dale Enhanced Edition. Now, you can get all of that minus Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, which costs $35 for the complete bundle, but minus Rogue Trader you can get all of the previous games for just $15. There's 650 hours of gameplay estimated. It might take you longer to get all of those games completed, and at least 3 of them are the finest examples of role-playing games ever committed to PC prior to Baldur's Gate 3 coming out. And, well, I mean, there's an argument that could be made that despite how great Baldur's Gate 3 undeniably is, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Planescape Torment were better. I mean, I don't know about that, but they're definitely at least as good. I mean, they are that good. They still hold up today. Although Planescape Torment is remarkably text heavy. But I mean, if you're in role-playing games, you're going to be expecting this sort of thing anyway. But it is even more text-heavy than Baldur's Gate 3, which is already a very text-heavy game. But, well, that didn't do Baldur's Gate 3's chances any harm, did it? I mean, it's already one of the best-selling games ever. Certainly one of the best reviewed. So, yeah, that's the RPG Masters bundle over at the Humble Store. $35 for the whole thing, including Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, or $15 for the whole thing without. I mean, seriously, this if you like your role-playing games, and you haven't played any of these titles, or if you have and you just fancy a bit of a nostalgia trip, this is a bundle that is going to keep you entertained for months. You might not even need to buy another game this year. There's so much content available in this bundle. That being the case, it probably won't even matter whether or not Star Wars Outlaws is shit, because this bundle of games will keep you going well into 2025. Unless you just don't like RPGs, in which case you're shit out of luck. Although it's not that bad. Also, well, there's not an awful lot else coming out in August, but you only have to wait until the 9th of September for Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. And then on September 19th, you've got God of War Ragnarok coming for the PC version, with Frostpunk 2 coming out the day after that. Things are a little more grim when you look ahead to what's coming out in October. There's a Silent Hill 2 remake, which, I mean, yeah, but I suppose it's going to find its fans. Blizzard Activision have got not one but two opportunities to disappoint everybody with the first expansion for Diablo 4 and Call of Duty Black Ops 6. November's looking even more grim. Assassin's Creed Shadows? Yeah. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, well, that's an extremely niche title. And Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl was supposed to be coming out on November 20th, but I'm pretty sure that's now been delayed to early 2025. Yeah, it's probably best not to look ahead too far, but I mean, I suppose the message here is that whatever type of game you like, in particular if you're a fan of RPGs, there's something available, if not now, then at least very soon, to satisfy anybody's appetite. And I hope today's episode of Mingles with Jingles has satisfied your appetite for a little bit of mingling with the jingling, because that's it for today. As always, hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.